USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Spotlight for Wednesday, March 8th, 2023. Each week we talk with a coach, player, administrator, or journalist about college hockey. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Get your tickets now at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Well, we're going to talk to a broadcaster who pays a whole lot of attention to one of his favorite leagues, Hockey East.
And joining us now on USCHO Spotlight, he is one of the play-by-play voices on the Hockey East Game of the Week on NESN. That's my broadcast partner most of the time, and good friend Tyler Murray. Welcome to the show, Mr. Murray. How are you getting excited for these playoffs? What are you doing to get yourself pumped up for the Hockey East postseason?
Just looking at the bracket, just looking at matchups, doing podcasts with you guys. It's a great time of year. It doesn't take much to get me fired up for these games. So thank you guys for having me on.
Yeah, if we're having you on, it usually does mean it's the postseason. And let's jump right into it. Before we even started the postseason, you had an interesting final week, kind of decided some seedings. League champion Boston University was crowned. Did you have any takeaways from that final weekend, and anything surprise you in terms of performances?
Yeah, I thought the most interesting weekend was up in Maine, where the Black Bears, they had a long shot chance at a first round bye, so they were playing for a lot. And then UMass came in there. It felt like they were limping their way to the playoffs, but the Minutemen, they get 6 points out of that weekend. They feel like they've maybe turned a bit of a corner. So I thought that was maybe a little concerning if you're a Maine fan, but they still do have the high seed in this first round coming up. So a favorable matchup for them. But instead of just rolling into the playoffs, Black Bears are definitely a team to keep an eye on.
They are, and they will be one of 6 teams that plays on Wednesday night in Hockey East. The matchups, Maine will host Vermont, Providence hosting New Hampshire, and the game you'll be calling, Boston College hosting UMass. Let's start with that game. You just mentioned it. UMass playing some of their better hockey of the year right down the stretch. They got an upset win at home of Northeastern 2 Fridays ago, and then last weekend, the sweep, as you mentioned, at Maine. That's a pretty tough place to win. Forget about win 2. What do you like about UMass, and is this maybe one of the easier to foresee upsets potentially in this first round?
Yeah, it is tough to call this one, always with the 8-9 matchup, but we've seen it even last year. UNH almost beat BC in overtime in the same showdown. But for UMass, it's interesting that Greg Carvel finally has had to take over the job of picking the goalies game to game. It was usually Jared DeMichael and Ben Barr, but tough timing for him that this is their most inconsistent goaltending season in his tenure. But maybe they found the answer now. Cole Brady, he hasn't been lights out the last 5 games, but he's given them a chance to win every single game. And Brady's got is a Devils draft pick, so he's got obviously a good pedigree. And Carvel says, he changes the equation for us. So I think that at least gives him confidence to know that they're going to have an opportunity. But they've lost 9 of their last 10 games to BC. The Eagles swept the season series, including a game of Frozen Fenway. They're going to go back to Connie Forum, where BC less than a month ago scored 5 first period goals, 6 unanswered eventually, and Nikita Nesterenko a hat trick. I mean, they ran him out of the building. It was 7-3. So, but that was against 3 different goaltenders. That was the epitome of not knowing who your netminder is. So they're going to have one goaltender, they hope, and that should help things out. But BC, I mean, if our guy Eric Galante was telling us about how many chances they're getting, but just not finishing. If they start finishing those chances, then they can beat anybody.
Any other thoughts on either the Providence UNH game? And when I say games, let's remind people that this is entirely a single elimination playoff in Hockey East. There is no best of 3 series. You don't show up, your season likely ends. But either the Maine, Vermont, or Providence UNH games. Any thoughts on those?
Yeah, let's go Providence UNH. And Mike Logan, the great voice of the Friars, was talking about how banged up they are right now. Riley Duran, Connor Kelly, and even their goaltender, Philip Svedback, all missed time against BU last weekend. So right now, I mean, they're a 500 team. 9 wins, 9 losses, 6 ties for Providence in Hockey East play. They lost 8 of 11 to end the regular season. I believe in Nate Lehman, no matter how much the odds are stacked against him. But you look at UNH, you and I always talk about that win over Arizona State before the break that turned things around. But Then they come back and they played well, but they lost 2 games to Union. It wasn't until January 6th, a 2-0 win at Providence, that the winning streak really started for UNH. So they're going to have confidence knowing they can go in there, win a tough game. It was Cy LeClaire and Chase Stevenson scoring the 2 goals against Providence. Those are guys they want to rely on. So even though they kind of fizzled out at the end, they had that 6-game unbeaten streak, UNH, and they lost a couple in a row to end the season. I think they're going to have a good amount of confidence there. So UNH should be interesting to watch. And then Vermont, we talked about how tough it is to go up to Maine and win. They still sound a little sour about last year's first round game. It was 2-1 on the road in Providence. And the quote from Todd Woodcroft, who's never afraid of a quote, he said that game-winning goal was, quote, an absolute fluke for Providence. It was thrown in front of the half wall, hit off a player, went off the goaltender. So it wasn't a bad call or anything, but they're hungry to prove that they belong. Vermont's made a lot of big steps this year. So I see them giving Maine a game at the very least.
The quarterfinal round, or I keep saying round, quarterfinal games will be on Saturday, and the only matchup we know at this point, UConn and UMass Lowell. Thoughts on those 2 teams?
Yeah, so UConn and Lowell, it's 2 of the tougher teams to predict, I think, in Hockey East this season. I mean, I think UConn can legitimately win this whole thing, but they've just been so unpredictable game to game. I mean, look last month. They beat Northeastern on the road, but then they get swept by UNH the next weekend. This last weekend against BC, they take a 3-2 lead into the third, but then give up 3 goals and it's over. And then they get a hat trick from Justin Pearson. The last game of the season, 6-5 win, their highest goal scoring output of the year. So, I mean, they're UConn's second highest scoring team in Hockey East, best PK in the league, but the worst face-off percentage in the power play has been kind of just average in conference play. So I have a hard time predicting UConn. Lowell, I think you have to trust Norm Bazin to have his team ready for these kinds of games, and he always seems to. It's ever since they got swept by Anchorage, it seemed like they turned the season around, but they haven't played their best hockey as of late. They've won just 2 of their last 9 games, so that probably is the toughest one to call. I would say UConn versus Lowell. Earlier
this week, or maybe it was last week, Steve Metcalf spoke about the difficulty with the pairwise for Hockey East this season. You mentioned that Anchorage series that pretty much plummeted Lowell. Back at the holiday break, we thought there might be 5 or 6 Hockey East teams that could qualify for the tournament. Right now, only BU is a lock. Merrimack, essentially at 15, is on the borderline. Is there a sense of desperation among these Hockey East teams this year, knowing that they've got to win to have any chance at all?
Of course, yeah. UMass coach Greg Carvel was telling us this week that he's confident because he doesn't have to get his guys fired up. They're just, the desperation is there, their urgency is there because their season is over with 1 loss. And that's an example of a UMass team that they're not really in the pairwise equation. But Steve Metcalf has said, if our teams can get in besides BU, he likes their chances on the national stage against anybody. And that's what commissioner is supposed to say. But I'm with him. I mean, you look at Merrimack. That's the hottest team in Hockey East right now, 5-game winning streak, top 3 defense, and the highest scoring offense in Hockey East during this run. And they've had some team of destiny type wins. And Northeastern, I think if they can get in, Jerry Keefe has talked about how they're winning the games on the big stage this year, where last year it didn't really happen so much. But Northeastern looks at those 4 games, 2 Bean Pots, 1 Frozen Fenway, and then the Toscano Family Ice Forum debut against UConn. They went in and won that game. They've won on some big stages this year. So, yes, there's urgency. It's a little disappointing from a league perspective to see where it's gone, but I think at the very least, BU, Northeastern, and Merrimack are more than good enough to represent Hockey East really well with a win or maybe more in the national tournament if they get the opportunity.
More with Tyler Murray in a moment. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida.
All right, class, it's the NCAA Men's Frozen Four. Welcome to Fandom 101. Want to help your team rule the rink? Here's your assignment. Lesson 1, go big for every goal. 2, when you bring it, bring enough for the whole class. And 3, attendance is encouraged, but passion is mandatory. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Buy your tickets today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
More with Hockey East NESN broadcaster Tyler Murray. As somebody who follows that league closely, how has it been to see sort of the changing of the guard? Not only bottom teams rising to the top, but names like York and Parker and Umili moving on, and a whole new generation of coaches.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that Norm Bazin has by far the most Hockey East tournament wins is wild, and it's not because he's not doing a great job. They got 3 conference championships in the last decade, but yeah, you're kind of used to the old guard. But it's been really fascinating to see some matchups like Greg Carville against his old assistant Ben Barr. He goes up there and beats a hot team last weekend against his former assistant. You got Greg Brown coming back from the NHL to coach Boston College, and it's been really fascinating to watch him operate with, again, a team loaded with draft picks, but they're relying on some younger guys this year and seeing how they've handled the ups and downs of a season. And then you compare it with now, I guess, the more veteran guys like Nate Lehman. How is he going to do coaching against another guy who's got some experience too in Mike Souza? So it's been fun to watch guys develop. Everybody, of course, wants to take a 5-win team to national champions in 5 years like they did at UMass, but it just doesn't happen that way for everybody. So it's been really fun to keep an eye on. And then we haven't even talked about Jay Pandolfo in his first year and what he's been able to do for a team that got just 1 first place vote. You can look across the board and they probably do have the most talent, but talent is one thing. Taking care of business like the Terriers did is another. So Jay Pandolfo deserves a lot of credit.
You mentioned Jay Pandolfo, BU the number 1 seed. They'll take on the lowest remaining seed from this first round, but there doesn't look like there's anybody who you'd want to say, oh, that's who I want to play. This looks like a tournament that's wide open for anybody to pull an upset.
Yeah, I would agree. I wonder what Jimmy thinks about this. The 3 seed Merrimack, they might be in a position where they could either get Providence, who's banged up, or Maine, or 2 seed Merrimack. Sorry. So Providence is banged up, or Maine. So I wonder, do you want to? You can't avoid the 8-9 matchup, BC versus UMass. But whoever comes out of that BC UMass game, they're going to be galvanized and fired up, and that would be a tough matchup for one of the top 2 seeds. So I don't know what you think about that, Jimmy.
I agree with you. If you've gotten out of the opening round, if you play on Wednesday and win, you've already played a playoff game, and that alone is good experience. So I always think of the teams where we've mentioned Minnesota last weekend sitting at home, and now the other teams played best of 3 series, and now they're going to get a Michigan State team that's excited, and knows that they just pulled off some pretty big upsets at Notre Dame. They probably feel some confidence, and then you've got a team that just sat around for a week, and that's difficult. Nobody wants to be sitting this time of year. It's a little easier in Hockey East where it's not a full week. It's most of these teams it's 7 days after their last game, but you still. The bye is wonderful. You're so close to getting to the TD Garden, but I always wonder: is it easy to start on time when you're coming off that bye? And those games, if you're a visiting team going in there and you can pull off, 2 goals early just in, catching a team that isn't maybe ready because they've been sitting around for a week. You never know. Chasing playoff games is not a good formula for success.
Yeah, I just think the scenario of if you're BU, you win the regular season title, and of course you're fired up to play a rivalry game, perhaps BU versus BC, but you also know anything can happen in those games, and they can prevent you from getting to the Garden, which would be a nightmare for the Terriers. So I think the bracket could line up in a pretty interesting way.
We've got 6 conferences with 6 different playoff formats. Hockey East single elimination all the way through. To me, that seems kind of dangerous for some teams. Is that something maybe you think they should reconsider? Maybe in some earlier rounds of best of 3. I know geographically Hockey East is laid out where it can work out as a single game.
The only reason I would lean toward the multiple game series is because we love watching these games and covering these games, so we'd love to do more of it. But no, I am in love with the current format just because of how unpredictable it is. And we did a lot of UNH games this year, and they were winless in their first 11 conference games. And for a lot of teams in a lot of different sports, you're done. But in this current format, if you get hot at the right time, you need to win 2 games this time of year. UNH needs to win once on Wednesday in a place they've already won this year, and then probably pull off a tough upset on Saturday. And then they're going to the Garden. That's what a turnaround that would be. So that's exciting for fan bases to stay locked in. And wouldn't you know it, despite the struggles, UNH had the second best attendance in Hockey East this year. Some of the best environments we've been in were at the Whittemore Center. So I like how that keeps everybody involved. And in the end, the quarterfinal series just a few years ago, you would have some game one upsets, and then the next two games would, in my experience, be pretty handled by the top seed. So you did avoid kind of having a team that probably deserved to be at TD Garden get eliminated. But for me, just the excitement of the single elimination is worth maybe having fewer games.
Tyler, I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot here, but more just to let you, maybe give us some mental prep here of how you're thinking about the playoffs. If you had one team, just one, that is not in the top 5, let's say, that will reach the Garden, one of the teams that is playing on Wednesday that will reach the Garden, which team would you pick?
And whoever comes out of Connie Forum on Wednesday in that first round, I think it's going to be hard to pick against them, at least out of the bottom half of the league. So BC or UMass. UMass, because like we said, they have the goaltender. And here's Greg Carvel said, we need Ryan Ufko and Scott Morrow to be stars. And then I think we can make a deep run. Great news, UMass fans. Those two guys are stars. They just maybe haven't been playing like it the last couple of weeks. But Ufko, he had a hat trick just a couple of weeks ago, first of his career. And Scott Morrow, his kind of highlight reel goal scoring style doesn't necessarily translate to a playoff game. But if he has open ice and he finds a way to score one of his crazy goals, Morrow can completely change the vibe in a game and in a building. So that's something that's nice to have in the playoffs. And then BC. All right. This is again from the great broadcaster at BC and on NESN, Eric Galante. He says they've outshot their opponents in 13 of their last 15 games. They've only won 4 of them, but 6 of their 9 losses during that stretch have been by 1 goal. So they're losing a lot of close games. They're getting a lot of opportunities. I think Trevor Kuntar is one of them, maybe not improved because I've always liked his game, but Trevor Kuntar's taken such a huge step forward. He scored 2 goals against UMass in their comeback win on February 18th. We talked about the Nestorenko hat trick. So maybe they don't have the Jack McBain that they can just feed the puck and let him do his power forward thing. But I think they've got some guys gaining confidence, and we haven't even mentioned Cutter Gauthier yet. So I think BC's got that scoring ability, and you can map it out. If BC wins at home, then they go to BU, and they'll have to try to beat a team that they beat at TD Garden in the Beanpot Consolation game last month. So it's not crazy to think BC could get it done.
Well, it will be a fun full week of playoffs here in Hockey East, beginning Wednesday night. If you're near a TV set, Tyler Murray, myself, we will be on the broadcast on NESN Plus from Conti Forum. Boston College hosting UMass, the 8-9 game in the first round. And then, of course, over the weekend, there will be tons of games on Saturday. Check your local listings for game times and matchups and all of that stuff. But Tyler, we always appreciate catching up with you this time of year. It's I know you enjoy it probably more than most people I know. You definitely get fired up for this. So we appreciate your enthusiasm and definitely appreciate you taking some time in a busy week.
I mean, you can talk pro, you can talk college. For me, Hockey East is one of the best leagues in all of sports. So we're very lucky to be covering the team. And thank you guys for having me on.
That's NESN's Hockey East play-by-play broadcaster, Tyler Murray. Jim, it seems like it could be anybody's tournament right now in Hockey East, especially after tonight's games.
Yeah, I mean, that is what's wide open here is this entire league. And that's why, unfortunately, you see the parity in this league. It's wonderful come playoff time, but that's also the reason that there's only one team in position in the pairwise right now. They didn't have the best out of conference record, but they had a decent out of conference record compared to some other leagues that have more teams in. So it's just the fact that nobody wanted to take this league over. Boston University almost did by default, but they're a darn good default to number 1. I'll tell you that. But, you can look at this. We didn't talk a ton about Merrimack Northeastern. Either of those teams easily could win this tournament, get to the NCAA tournament. And I really do believe what Steve Metcalf said there a couple of weeks ago. Anybody that gets into this NCAA tournament can do damage.
Yeah, and I agree. And you mentioned Merrimack just on the edge, Northeastern, just below the bubble. A couple of good wins could propel them into a pairwise position as a 4th seed. And how'd you like to be a number 1 seed having to take on Merrimack or Northeastern?
I mean, let's just say it's Northeastern, just for conversation's sake. Imagine you're the number 1 seed in a region. You're playing number 4 seed Northeastern, and you're facing the Mike Richter Award, defending Mike Richter Award winner in Devin Levi in net. And he can go in there and post 40, 50 saves. That's who he is, what he does. So it's so, that would be scary. So, and that's why I say anybody that gets into this tournament can do damage. Merrimack's the same thing. They have 2 goaltenders that are lights out when they're on. You can almost go down. UConn, Lowell's got such experience in the postseason, a great postseason coach. Boston College, UMass, a couple of years removed from a national championship, and they still have a lot of pieces from that team that are in their lineup. I mean, there's just so much danger in this league. And I don't even mention Maine in there. And I think Maine is on a resurgence right now, playing great hockey since January 1.
Well, as Tyler mentioned, you don't have to win a whole lot of games to get to the Garden. And that makes this a very exciting and perhaps volatile tournament.
Absolutely. In 2 wins if you're in the opening round, 1 win if you're in the quarterfinal round. I mean, that's crazy. All you have to do is win 1 game. And the coach I look at right there is probably Norm Bazin. Didn't get home ice, got the bye though. You're in that weird spot where you don't get a single home game in the playoffs, but all you need is 1 win, an upset, maybe not an upset on the road. They've already beat UConn this year. So you go down to Toscano and win a game, enter the Garden. And that's with a coach that has reached the Garden, I think, in 9 times in his 11 seasons in the league. So he's got a great track record. But then you're playing a team in UConn that lost in last year's Hockey East final in overtime. So much experience, just a great track record. I think we're going to see some unbelievable hockey in Hockey East over the next 2 weekends.
Well, I'm sure you and Tyler will have a great call and a great time tonight. USCHO Spotlight is sponsored by the NCAA Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Secure your seats at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Find our podcast at uscho.com/podcasts or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Spotlight.